Hey, welcome to the 430th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patrons Hamilton Henson, Kelsey Johnson, and Anna Julia Onf. I'm Matt Enlow.
And I'm Oren Kaplan, and today we are talking about all sorts of fun things. We're going to talk a little bit about some stuff we were working on lately, including, our editor Noah will love this, how to make a DCP, which we all got a refresher course on over the last couple of days. Yeah, we're going to talk about working with animals. I just worked with, I think about 30 of them this past week, and it was...
They prefer crew member, Oren.
Sorry. What's funny is I'm like, is it better to call them pets or animals? I don't know. I just felt it's like when you're not working with just dogs or just cats, what do you call them?
Mm-hmm. Animal friends.
The talent, the cast. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we're also going to talk about Matt's kitchen epiphany. It's directly related to filmmaking careers. But you made a Bear reference while you were talking to me about it, and then later on revealed that you didn't even know that season 3 of The Bear was out.
Yes, chef. Yeah, it's the 4 pillars of a creative career. We're going to talk through them. It's kind of an idea that I've got forming. Who knows? This is probably the first iteration of my TED Talk. So
you're trying out some new material.
What better place to workshop things than in a completely public forum?
But before we jump into everything, I'm just going to remind people right now, 2.5 minutes into the episode, that we have a Patreon, patreon.com/justshootitpod. It's a place where you can go support us. We'll call your name out. I mean, really, you're just basically letting us know we should keep going. And every month we look at our Patreon and we're like, okay, enough dollars to pay for some server fees, maybe to pay Noah for 1 episode of editing, maybe 2 sometimes. So it really helps us keep the podcast going. It's been going for almost 10 years. And we really, really appreciate it. If you feel like you got anything out of this podcast, email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com and tell us, but also put $1 in the Patreon bucket. And it just makes us really happy. So thank you.
Also, if you are curious about crowdfunding, WeFunder specifically, if you're curious about how you can raise money through WeFunder, I've got an exclusive podcast episode. I talked to a listener who reached out, had some questions, because that's how we raised funds for my wife's film, See You Next Christmas, as mentioned on the show many times before. And it was kind of a great conversation, but I felt a little weird about having all of it up on the internet completely public. So I thought, Patreon is kind of more of an in-crowd, trusted friends of the show sort of environment. So I felt a little bit more comfortable hosting it there. So I'm going to be putting that up relatively soon as well. So if you are curious about WeFunder, shoot us an email and let us know if this is something that sounds good to you. But I think we'll make that available to patrons at any level. A little bit of exclusive content for the patrons out there. We're going to be doing more of that.
So patreon.com/justshootitpod. We appreciate it. Now, let's chat about DCPs. What is a DCP, Matt? What percentage of our audience do you think has any idea what a DCP is? And what percentage knows what it stands for?
I would say a very high percentage have, an operational understanding of what a DCP is. But just in case you're unaware, remind me, I don't even remember what the acronym stands for.
I'm pretty sure it's Digital Cinema Package.
You're right. That's it. That is what it is. But essentially, a DCP is like a hard drive that's encoded with your movie so that fancy movie theaters can play it as seamlessly as possible. Basically, that it's loaded up into the projector. And so you never get that buffering. There's no buffering. Basically, essentially, it's like butter coming out of the projector and onto the movie screen. But it tends to be something that can be a bit of a barrier for filmmakers, especially on the low budget side, because they can cost thousands of dollars.
It's funny. You mentioned the hard drive. I have always heard of them referred to as send us the DCP and you send a hard drive with the files on it. I guess I've always separated the hard drive from the DCP itself, but now that you mention it, I do know when you're sending your movie to 5,000 movie theaters, you send 5,000 hard drives, that is a thing.
Now I think that more commonly
they send it around and they kind of send it from theater to theater and copy it onto their server or something.
I think they send it to a hub and then that hub is then distributing it.
There probably are companies like Simple DCP that their sole purpose is to upload DCPs to different servers and things.
Yeah.
Anyway, the interesting part is that our editor, Noah, who's editing this right now, and his film is playing at Tony Gapastioni's Film Festival.
BRAVEMAKER, Walter Grayson the Submarine is playing at BRAVEMAKER.
Huh. Thoughts? Questions?
Do you have like a favorite photographer?
Vivian Meyer.
Okay, don't judge me for asking this, but what's your star sign?
My grandpa doesn't believe that dinosaurs are real.
I don't really talk about it very often. It's not a great icebreaker. Hi, I'm Walter, and my dad is Walmart James Cameron.
So it's playing at the BRAVEMAKER Film Festival, and they needed a DCP, and Noah sent them a DCP. And the thing about DCPs, as opposed to like a regular ProRes file or a QuickTime MP4 or whatever, is that usually you have to get through a few barriers before it's actually like can screen on in a movie theater. And one of those barriers needs to go through QC, like some sort of quality control where people are making sure that it passes. And we're not 100% sure why, but Noah's DCP, which he had successfully made in the past for other film festivals, did not pass for BRAVEMAKER Film Festival. And Noah was going to come to San Francisco. It was going to be his first time in California, which I think, if you're a filmmaker, I think it's kind of like you should go to California at some point in your life. Right? Sure. Yes, it's becoming a much less popular place to film make, but I still think it's still the main. It's still the home of Hollywood.
Still the main place right now. Yeah.
And so when we found out his DCP wasn't working and he was contemplating not going to the festival at all because his movie wasn't going to screen, you and I and our friend Bobby Lamb, cinematographer, who's been on the podcast and also works as a colorist, you were like, Bobby knows how to make DCPs. Let's do this thing. And so we just spent like the last 24 hours, like, first of all, the sheer size of the files is kind of funny, right? Noah had this 479 gigabyte file of his movie. It's like a 4K ProRes file. And he has to get it. He lives in Michigan. He had to get it to us in LA. And he had mailed it on a hard drive and uploaded it through WeTransfer, which is, it's kind of funny because at certain file sizes, based on your internet connection, it might be faster or at least more reliable to mail a hard drive than to send it online. Not everyone has fiber internet. And if your upload fails halfway through the night or your computer goes to sleep or whatever, now you got to start all over.
That's why I love Dropbox or any sort of like app-based syncing. I like much better than WeTransfer. WeTransfer, if your computer goes to sleep, all of a sudden you have to start from scratch, and it's like pretty nerve-wracking,
But even Dropbox, could you upload a 479 gig file to your Dropbox right now?
What I would do is I would put it in my Dropbox folder on Finder, and then it would progressively upload.
Right, but I believe you and I...
Oh, do I have 400 gigs? No, I do not.
500 gigs pretty much, yeah.
500 gigs, yeah.
So that's like, okay, so now I have to upgrade your Dropbox. Anyway, it's just like weird that nowadays, and when we're consuming so much video, like literally on our like Apple Watches and stuff, that it's still so difficult to send one movie.
Sure. I mean, in comparison though, back in the old days, like literally, if you were an independent filmmaker, you'd have to fly your film, like literally you'd fly your film out. And also you'd have to like deal with airport security because X-rays ruin film.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So like, depending on what speed of film you have, like you have to get special permissions to do it outside, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, literally like guys would just like fly reels, their movie around would be in like a bunch of canisters, like the size of a friggin', duffel bag. And you'd have to carry your movie around, and you'd only have 1 or 2 copies of your movie. You'd have to leave one back home just in case, and then fly around with the interpositive or whatever. I don't
Remember
know.
when we saw Celine's song at the Kodak Film Awards, and she was like, we're in South Korea. They didn't have anywhere to process the film, but they didn't want to fly it for past lives. So they had to like drive it or take it by boat.
I think we might be conflating stories.
Was there a different movie?
It was Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer
Hoyte.
Hoyte van Hoyte was there, and he talked about that as well. they were shooting scenes in India and they would just literally have guys on the train, like get on the train to avoid any sort of x-ray issues for the reasons I was just describing, and take a train to the nearest lab, which was hundreds of miles away, to get this film that, by the way, the IMAX film that literally he worked with IMAX to invent.
Right. Yeah. And then, I guess it's that type of film transferring that wins you an Oscar, an Academy Award.
So anyway, back to the other end of the spectrum. If some people get to invent their own film.
Yeah, I will say one other thing that when you've been to many film festivals that I only learned when I started going to film festivals was that there is a person whose job it is at the film festival. They're in charge of like film trafficking.
Yeah.
And their whole job is to get files, film reels, whatever, all that stuff transferred and moved. And it's like, when you're a filmmaker, that's just like the last thing on your mind.
The last thing you want to think about is like literally, how do I get a hard drive to some nice, likely volunteer who's like stressed out and looking at spreadsheets and hasn't had a chance to QC your film.
And hoping the movie makes it on time.
Right, exactly. So in this case, this film festival, BRAVEMAKER, only is screening via DCP. However, plenty of other film festivals will allow you to screen a Blu-ray, or even sometimes I think I've seen people do it, like stream it off a link or an H.264. The nice thing about DCP is that, and this would be true for, I guess, if you screened at other formats as well, but the best thing about DCP is that like, that means that someone is doing a QC that makes sure that everything is going to look and sound right.
Yeah. The sound's not going to blow people away.
It's not going to blow people away.
It won't be too quiet.
Or, in the case of plenty of films, like, oh, shoot, something didn't render out right. Or like, there's a file missing or a font that doesn't load or whatever, when you're doing your offline and all of a sudden you realize, oh shoot, this person's system doesn't have my, my custom font on it or something.
Arial.
Yeah. Arial new.
Yeah. Noise.
NEW. Not, yeah.
Oh, NEW.
So QC is designed to catch all of those things basically.
But nowadays you can make the DCP yourself, kind of, if you're brave.
However, the catch is you can homebrew a DCP. There's a handful of different programs out there, but it's very hard for you to QC because you don't have a movie theater where you can go through and properly load it up into the projector and double check everything. So that's really the apprehension there. And especially if it's a stereo mix versus a mono mix versus a 5.1 mix. I think when we were doing our festival run, I think we did a mono mix just to be safe, actually. Yeah. On the advice of our mixer. And I think it was the right move, honestly, because
our mixer was like, mono mixes, they're the best. They just like put all their sliders to the center and
you just slide it to the center. But no, think about it. If you haven't been able to QC in a 5.1 or stereo environment, right? And you don't know how the theater is going to behave, and our film didn't have fancy effects. Like if we'd done a 5.1, we'd probably throw some, party ambience in the back behind people and you'd hear everybody from the front or whatever. You could get a little bit more creative, but like there wasn't anything that needed any special pans or anything like that. And so it was either stereo or mono, but I think mono, and then all the levels just sounded consistent no matter where you were in the theater, which was ultimately the smartest and safest way to do it. I think we actually, I take it back. We exported a stereo and a mono mix. And at our, our 4-wall premiere, we rented like the Lemley Theater in Glendale. We listened to both real quick and made the call on, I think mono sounded better, honestly.
Oh, interesting. Just thinking while you're talking about how we used to get so into like our 5.1 mixes, and nowadays just like, nothing, like just so many people are watching everything on stereo speakers.
On their phone. On their phone.
Even on TV at home and stuff.
The best it's going to sound is like, honestly, a nice pair of headphones. Like if somebody has like Beats by Dre headphones.
Right, that simulate the 5.1.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I think Bobby used DaVinci Resolve to make the DCP. We heard a lot about another program called DCP-O-Matic that's free, but sounds a little tricky to use. And like you said, it's hard to tell if your result was successful. But yeah, I haven't made a DCP, I think, since my movie The Hammer came out in 2010. So
sure.
And that's when I hired, I think, like Deluxe or Dolby or someone.
I mean, a homebrew option wasn't even on the table back then.
Yeah, believe me, I tried to find a homebrew option back then because I love not spending thousands of dollars. But
how much was it back then? Probably like
$2,500 or
20, yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember exactly, but I do know that I played at the Cleveland Film Festival, and the closing night movie was Soul Surfer. You know, about Bethany Hamilton, the surfer who lost her arm to a shark.
Yes.
And their print didn't come in time for the closing night movie, so they screened my movie again. And it was pretty awesome.
I've told that story now that I think of it. But that reminds me of my final piece of filmmaking, film festival advice. Always have a Blu-ray with you.
Yeah.
Like we had a Blu-ray with us.
BRAVEMAKER doesn't play. I wonder if, I mean, Blu-ray is like, I know you're a big Blu-ray head with your special features, but like, it's kind of like a dead medium. I mean, even like the screeners and stuff are coming on DVD. Like, I don't know who uses Blu-ray.
Way cheaper to burn a DVD than it is a Blu-ray. Also, DVD screeners are for people who haven't kept up with technology, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's probably a price thing too. You're sending out thousands.
It's meant to be like a
movie.
lowest common denominator, basically. Like, okay, the DVD screener is like, we know everyone is going to be able to watch this.
Right. I guess I'm just curious how Blu-ray player sales, like if they've sold more than 100 in 2024.
Yeah, I'm sure they have. However, I think you run into the QC problem that I was describing before. It's like there's still opportunities for glitches. So that's the challenge there. But it's nice to have one, and it's not, look, Blu-rays don't get fried by X-rays. You know, they're lightweight, they're durable. Once you have one mastered, you can burn a bunch of them. So it's an easy thing. You could give one to every single person who's ever going to attend a festival and have them handy just in case. It's really like your break in case of emergency screening option. Yeah. And there's no buffering in the way that like loading, if you had like a hard drive, you'd be like, hey, try it. You know, it takes a minute to load and all that stuff. So,
right. Well, yeah. So that's DCPs for you. And it's funny that we both, I guess you've probably dealt with them more recently, but for me, it was like a blast from the past.
Bobby mastered our DCP for us. And since a handful of indie filmmakers have been like, hey, how'd you get your DCP? And I put them in touch. So I knew that Bobby could homebrew one relatively easily. So if you're looking for a DCP, I don't know his rates, hit us up and we can, I'm sure Bobby would love to.
Good side hustle from Bobby Lamb.
You know, do a little, a little side hustle. Yeah.
So thank you so much to Bobby, who is a very good cinematographer. And you should check out his website as a cinematographer, which is...
It's bobbylam.com. BOBBYLAM.com.
Okay, moving on.
Oren, I've been dying to know, what have you been working on lately?
So I just shot this for 3 nights. First of all, we talked about this. This night thing is just a nightmare. No pun intended.
What was your call time?
My call time was 9:30 p.m. every night. And our wrap time was like 7 a.m. ish. And then you go home, you're home by 8. Your kids are waking up. You got to take them to school in summer camp now. And then you do that whole thing. And then you're back home by 9:30. And then you're like super jazzed. It's like all the vitamin D from the sun is like going into your skin or whatever. It's so hard. Everyone on set was like, why didn't you get a hotel room? I was like, how would you get a hotel room to shoot 15 minutes away from my house? But yeah, we were shooting in a place where people go. So we had to be out of there by the time it opened. So we could only shoot during close hours. Anyhow, it was crazy, but we did have a lot of animals, which it's funny. I asked the animal trainer, I was like, how are all these animals going to deal with like a totally upside down day? Like, is this dog or this cat going to be performing at 3 a.m.? And they're like, oh, they don't care at all. Like they just sleep so much of the day that for us to wake them up and be like, here's some treats, they'll be like, pumped.
Yeah, it's fine. I guess that's funny because I thought that they would be like, you know, because these animals are training for a long while in certain circumstances, probably like at least a couple weeks. And I thought, they'd be slowly weaning them like you do, you know, a big international flight, like, oh, they're sleeping later, they're giving them doggy melatonin. No, they just woke them up. It's fine. No big deal.
Yeah. It's, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I don't know this as a fact. I'm sure someone listening knows way more than me, but I think like with dogs, it's like you just wake them up and they're awake and then they're like normal. And then you stop interacting with them and they go to sleep. It's like,
that's funny.
That's all.
I don't know that totally checks out, but I guess a dog's going to nap when a dog wants to nap. So
I mean, they sleep like 18 hours a day. So, but yeah, it was, I did this campaign for this company, BarkBox, last year that had probably like 18 dogs in it or something. But the most dogs I ever shot at once was 2. I think I had 2 dogs running together and they were both supposed to be carrying these like lightsaber toys. And the shot was like these 2 kids are playing with lightsabers. And then these 2 dogs run in the foreground and they're also playing with lightsabers. The whole campaign was like, hey, these humans and these dogs are doing like the same thing. But just getting that one shot, I've found so difficult because, you don't want to see trainers in the shot, which means they have to send the dogs into frame from off frame, right? Mm-hmm. And dogs, animals in general, like don't really like running right towards the camera and stuff. So we had to kind of like build a little path for them and have another trainer behind the camera calling them. But when you have more than one dog running, they run at different speeds. It's not like you can be like, okay, just stay next to each other the whole time. So we like one dog was just so much faster than the other dog. So we just had to every take start that dog a little bit farther back and a little bit farther back, a little bit farther back until when they ran, both of them landed next to each other as they crossed the camera, So fast forward to my shoot this week where I wanted to have a shot of like dogs and cats running out of this door. And I had, I think I had like 12 dogs and I had 6 cats, but I ended up only shooting 3 of them because the cats, man, I mean, you've worked with cats so much. I actually haven't worked with cats. Yeah. But I guess even though they train them, like you said, they sent us videos, like here's these 3 cats doing this or 4 cats walking around or doing all this stuff. When they bring them to set, they have to retrain them one at a time. So it's like we had this motion control rig where we're like, this camera is moving forward and spinning as the animals are running towards us. And apparently this is very scary for a cat. It's also like really loud. It's like, and it's this big giant machine.
The noise is probably it's a big moving noisy thing. Yeah. It's really kind of stacked against you.
Yeah. And we had probably like 60 to 80 people on set and we're all inside this location. And also the people that work at this place, they have to do some work overnight, like cleaning and moving things. So they're in there.
It's MOS, so it's like not that big a deal, you think. And then all of a sudden the animals are distracted by everything.
Like if the cat hears one like shoe squeak, like 200 feet away, they're going to freak out. So we had to start playing music just when the cats came out to try to drown out the noises. But they would I'm like, okay, we're like an hour behind. Let's just bring those 3 cats and have them run. And they're like, okay, which cat first? I'm like, what do you mean which cat first? We were doing 3 cats. You showed me the 3 cats can do it. They're like, oh yeah, but we have to show them where they're running to. And then we have to show them what the camera move is. And then we have to do this and we have to just get them used to not being scared. And we have to do it one at a time. And so this thing that I thought would take like 10 minutes ends up taking like an hour. And then I just started using the cats a lot less,
Sure.
Because they took so much longer. The dogs you can put together, but we had a bulldog.
You also learn, you have favorites.
Oh, totally.
Like some of these, like there's a few cats where you're like, oh man, the so-and-so, like I remember there would be instances where on my Whiskas jobs where there was this one breed of cat that they really loved the most. And there was one famous one that we flew in from another country and all of the agency people knew that cat by name.
Oh, that's cool.
They were like, we got to get Cosmo. I can't remember what it was. I think it maybe was Cosmo, but it was like, we got to get that cat. This is a hard shot. Bring in your ringer. We need the star.
Our shoot was like the exact opposite because we had this cat named Chipmunk. By the way, at least on my shoot, I'm assuming probably on your shoot, the cats always come in twin pairs. And sometimes they'll try one cat. Like we had this black cat named Watson and he just couldn't do his thing. They're like, okay, bring in Jethro, like identical looking cat.
And it's because cats in particular, but I think it's true for dogs too. Once they're done, once they're over it, there's no There's no convincing a cat. You can't call the cat's agent and be like, hey, listen, we got to get, you can't sweet talk a cat. They're just over it.
Yeah.
They're motivated by food and that's it. So like if you try a bunch of times and
they're not hungry
full,
anymore. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So you don't get a ton of takes.
Get spooked. They hear something. They don't like the camera or whatever. That's that. Yeah.
Yeah. They are so tricky, but we had this cat, Chipmunk. His twin is Squirrel, but Chipmunk is Mayo Cat from like the Super Bowl campaign with Kate McKinnon and Pete Davidson. And it's like this famous cat. And the whole time I was telling like the agency folks and the client, it's like, this is Mayo Cat. Like we got to use this guy. He's so good. And they're like, yeah, but we want a tabby. And we want like, they were really into
breeds
diversity. Yeah. So they went like, let's get a dog with wheels. Let's get a 3-legged dog. Let's get a cat with one eye. Then we wanted to make a reference to like a college mascot. So let's get, which is a type of dog. So let's get this dog. And we brought that dog and they're like, no, can we get like a different color version of that same dog? And it's like, dude, we're trying to get highly trained animals. And you're like being so specific. We also had puppies that were 9 weeks old. And we had a piglet that was 5 weeks old. So,
just as a reminder for it's different with puppies and kittens, but like on my very first cat job, it was about kittens going to college.
Right,
kitten college. And we wanted the really fluffy little kittens, like the brand new little kittens. They were like 3 weeks old. I think like by the time they were like 6-8 weeks old, they would start like kind of slimming down and looking more like adolescent cats. You wanted like just a fucking fuzzball. And I've talked about this on the podcast for a long time now, but a 3 or 4 week old kitten can't see anything.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like if you were like, hey, we want a 5-month-old baby, they'd be like, oh yeah, for sure. But also they're an infant. They can't do not 5-month-old, but like a 6-week-old baby, can't see very far, can't sit up straight, cannot do anything. So even though kittens, they can walk around and they meow and it looks like they're looking around, it's easy to forget that they're literally babies. And puppies are similar in that way. Like they're still developing their skills and their awareness and their fine motor skills,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like if you were shooting with humans and you're like, oh, the agency really wants this like cute little girl, like a 5-year-old girl. And you're like, but we could get Meryl Streep to do this part. That's like how it is. Like we can get the dog from the artist to do this. And they're like, yeah, but we want a puppy. I'm like, yes, but this is like the Meryl Streep of animals. They can do anything we want. Yeah, it's a funny situation because when you're trying to get all these different specific types of dogs and cats, you can't always rely on them being well trained. So what we ended up having to do with the cats, you really do have to shoot them separately a lot before you can shoot them together. But also, I think famously, you're not supposed to mix cats that live in different houses together. And we had like a shot where they wanted like a cat sitting on a dog, and they're like, okay, we'll see what we can do. The trainers just say yes to everything, and then you get to set, and they're like, yeah, it didn't really work. And you're like, why did we not know this earlier? But with the dogs, like we had this like corgi that was, I guess I didn't know this, but corgis are like herding dogs, I guess. There's tiny, but once you put them in a group of other dogs running, they try to get all the other dogs in line. Anyway, so now some of these dogs are fighting. So it's like from a aesthetic visual point of view, we had this really tall poodle. And then we had like our best runner is Diego, like a medium-sized dog. And we had this tiny, tiny Pomeranian that was just so cute. And if you are drawing storyboards, you probably put the tall dog in the middle, the medium-sized dog on like the right, and the little dog on the left. So you kind of have a triangle, like some balanced frame. But they're like, oh no, we can't put this Pomeranian's going to get trampled by this poodle. So it's like a lot of our frames are forced into like which dogs are going to get along with each other. And yeah, so you kind of just, it's a lot of compromising.
There's that. And also like your boards, speaking of boards, we talk a lot about on the show, like when you're boarding things, you can there's a little bit of wishful thinking in those, right? Like everything has to work perfectly or whatever. And with animals, sometimes you'll find that there's a little bit more acting. Like you'll add a tiny little facial expression of like the dog looking wistfully up the thing, like with hungry eyes or something like that. All of that stuff is at best wishful thinking and at worst a lie, right?
Yeah. Well, so if you want to do
literally have a VFX plan for how you're going to augment the facial expression of a dog.
Totally. Or even if you want to do an over the shoulder shot, the dog's looking at something. I want to see what they're looking at from behind them. Now you need to put a trainer in front of the thing that they're looking at so that they will look in that direction. But now they're in the shot, Yeah. The other thing for me is like, I love moving the camera, but I'm also working in commercials. So in the storyboards in my animatic, I'm like, okay, this is 2 seconds. This is 1.5 seconds. This is 3.5 seconds. And then I find out I can't shoot any of these shots. I want all these dogs and cats running out of a door, right? I can't shoot the cats with the dogs. I can't shoot the cats together. I can't arrange some of the dogs next to the dogs I want, but I want to move the camera because I think it's more interesting and more exciting. So now I have to get motion control, right? I have to shoot all these dogs and cats separately. I have to try to make sure they're not all stepping in the same place geographically on the set at the same time. And I'm locked because of the camera move to a timing, right? Like if the black poodle is standing 5 feet away from the camera when the camera starts turning, and the tabby cat is also standing in this exact same spot when the camera starts turning, they're now standing on the same spot, and you've got issues, especially if they're moving at different speeds. Like now animals are running through each other's 3-dimensional space. It's just so like every shot becomes this really complicated VFX shot, and all it is like some dogs running at it. All it is like these shots that someone saw on TikTok last night. It was like, oh, it's cute. I saw all these puppies running out this door. Let's do this shot.
I want to unpack a little bit more of what you're talking about, just so that people who maybe haven't seen the shots you're describing can understand things. So like, for instance, you've got a shot of a bunch of animals rounding a corner headed towards the camera. And so the way that you shot that is that you shot multiple plates. You shot the corgi running around the corner. You shot the poodle running around the corner. You shot the tabby cat running around the corner. And now,
while the camera is pushing in and twisting,
is the additional layer that's tricky. If it had been locked off, you could retime it so that the poodle goes first and the corgi goes second and the tabby goes last. And you could make sure that none of them would be on top in the same space as the other would be, because you can slide everything around, right? But because now you've got a motion control rig where the camera is flying through the air, that, like you said, locks the timing of the shot. So if you call action and it takes 3 seconds before the corgi is rounding the corner, and it's probably hugging the corner more or less. It's probably pretty close to the edge of whatever obstacle they're running around. And the poodle is, 2.5 seconds at that same point in the camera move. Then they're intersecting each other in space. They're on top of each other. And so it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Also, if like some of the animals, if I'm trying to run more than one animal at a time, if I'm trying to run 10 dogs at a time, any dog that runs out after the camera stops moving is not going to make the shot, because like
it's unusual.
Timed. My camera move is timed to be like 2.5 seconds, the exact length it needs to be in the shot, and the animals don't get the cues at the same time that the camera man does. So he's like starting the camera move, and we're still waiting for the dogs for a few frames. So it's just so tricky. I mean, I think like this is not advice I'd give, but I feel like a smart person would just not include a lot of camera moves. They would just shoot plates, or they would include coverage or something.
Yeah. What I had done in this circumstance, and motion control wasn't an option on these jobs, I would shoot extra wide with the intention of doing a pan and scan move, basically. So your shots look better because as a camera is moving through Z space, you're getting parallax, you're feeling the perspective shift of everything happening. I would have done the lock off version where we're zooming and rotating, scaling things up, basically. The upside of that is that I don't have the same sort of problems that you have. Like, I can use all of these plates and you can comp them together and more or less it's fine.
And you get to kind of art direct your whole shot.
Yeah.
In a way that
exactly.
I can choose a take, but that's about it. Otherwise, I just have to choose whether to use an animal or not use an animal. You know, one of the things I learned a couple of years ago about commercial filmmaking is that usually my plan is like pretty decent. I have like a few backup things and, you know, a shot here or there to cut to, but like the more I craft my storyboards to be what the edit is going to be, the more intentional each shot can be. Like, this shot ends with this action and that leads us into this action. And
you're spending 100% of your time on one shot rather than 50% of your time on a shot that you might not use.
Yeah. Like,
right?
I'm trying to not hose things down. You know, I also don't do like a lot of dialogue stuff. So that, you know, I think with dialogue and comedy, like sometimes just getting a lot more shots and a lot more coverage is better to build the comedic beats in post. But if I'm trying to make something visually interesting or with momentum or energy, I like to really plan my shots out and then go get those shots and try to not get like the crappy versions of those shots because inevitably they'll be used.
Get used.
Which I just had a couple edits where that was, I literally just did like wides and close-ups of someone talking to camera, walking around, and the close-ups were just like insurance in case we really have to edit some dialogue out or something. And they just used almost all close-ups. And I'm like, what? Why did we even shoot this in a location if you're just using close-ups? What's the point of close-ups? I don't know. I've somehow grown to really hate close-up shots.
You hate them. And I don't disagree, actually. I totally understand where you're coming from, for sure.
It's funny. I did an extreme close-up recently, like on someone's mouth as they're talking, saying like the most important word. It was for that Jimmy O Yang Popeyes thing, where he's like quoting himself, calling boneless chickens little white meat lies, which is based on this article he wrote in Bon Appetit magazine. And then, of course, they didn't use that. Like, yeah, I had like a profile shot. I mean, you know, like a super extreme close-up on a mouth can be kind unflattering, or especially in a food commercial.
In a food commercial.
Yeah. But I loved, we had Nina Meredith on. I think she's the one that was like, I either want to shoot super close or super far, you know? And it's like, yeah, that's like, you know, a detail and then like scope and then like an environment.
I think I didn't bring it up in the conversation because it was flowing so well that I didn't want to, but I'd seen a TikTok just the other day that was like talking about photojournalism and the way that this photojournalist would cover a story. And it was always wide establishing. And then, you know, the subject and then texture. So that translates film language wise to wide, medium, extreme close up. Yeah. Insert. Yeah. And you see that formula and you're like, yeah, that, you know, each of those three have to be perfectly composed and interesting and all that. The detail has to be truly adding texture and has to be fascinating. The portrait has to be really striking, and the location has to be meaningful in some way for all of that to work. But that mixture feels pretty good.
Yeah. The problem, I'm calling it a problem, I don't know if it really is a problem, is that the medium close-up shot is probably the easiest shot to make look good, you know? And it's, with social media, it's like kind of the most ubiquitous shot.
Our phones are built for it.
Yeah. It's the FaceTime shot, basically, right? Even in 16:9 or anamorphic or whatever, it's kind of that same shot. So people like fall in love with that shot, even though it tends to not tell you a lot visually, you know? Like, you're processing the dialogue, you're seeing a person. Yeah, obviously you can see a performance, but it lacks like context, you know. Usually.
You want to layer things on a little bit more. Yeah, 100%.
So, anyway, and obviously, like, I mean, my philosophy, which I did not invent, I think most commercial directors are like this, is just to like try to never repeat a shot. You know, you got 30 seconds. You're gonna tell a story in like somewhere between 8 and 18 shots. Like you can get different
shoot
shots.
8 shots.
Yeah. So that's why I just get annoyed when people just keep using the medium close-up shot. Because unless it's like really designed to be ping-ponging in a really interesting way, it's annoying. And there's a really good YouTube video essay I saw. I don't remember who made it, but it was about the Challengers, that movie. It's a dialogue scene just between the two guys. I think it's like a famous, like the hot dog scene or something.
Mm-hmm. Where churro scene, maybe?
Or churros, yeah. Have you seen the movie? Okay, yeah. Maybe they're buying a churro and they sit down and they eat it. While they're talking.
And then one of them bites the other's churro at the end.
The lady in
it's
the
like in like a campus cafe, basically. Yeah.
So this video essay just shows the amount of coverage. He's like, this is a scene of just two guys talking. And supposedly the churro bite or something was improvised or something. Like there's some stuff that the actors brought in. But he's like, he covered this scene from like 30 different angles, It's just two people talking. And, obviously you need to have the budget and schedule to support something like that.
The schedule is the thing that really, because when you've got 2 or 3 angles on an actor, oftentimes you're picking based off of performance, like, yes, there's the timing of the scene, like when you want to cut in for emphasis and things like that.
But do you feel like sometimes you're working with really incredible actors and every take is like pretty decent?
Every take is perfect?
Not perfect. Like this one's funny for this reason. This one's funny for this reason, but we like this
Certainly.
shot because...
And I would argue that not most, but like plenty of actors that we've worked with throughout our careers can be that consistent, but you do need to give them time. Do you know what I mean? Like if it's like, okay, we got two takes, great, moving on, like is 100% of that shot going to be usable? And that's kind of what you need for it to be if you're going to use 18 different angles.
Right.
Then it's a lot harder for you to know specifically what you need from each of these angles. Sometimes people just previs like crazy, or they just have that sort of vision where they're like, I know this is the angle for each of these lines, in which case you can be really precise and laser focused. But I don't know.
I imagine
the way I shoot.
In that movie, I'm sure they had at least 2 cameras, if not 3. For a dialogue scene like that. So you're knocking off a lot of shots, and there is blocking, right? They pick up the churro in one part of the cafe and they walk to another. So you're not doing 18 angles for the entire scene from top to bottom.
Sure.
You're splitting it up like 5 angles for this scene, 4 angles for the walk over, 6 angles for the sit down.
There's also a handful of like great kind of short oneers in that movie, and those to me were super exciting. Oneers where you didn't realize, you're like, wait a minute, they haven't cut yet.
Yeah. In a feature, there's that's like kind of how you bring variety. I think you have a really staccato scene that has a lot of cuts, and then you have a scene that's a oneer, and you feel like you're traversing like different,
have you
styles.
seen it yet?
No.
I think you'd like it.
Yeah.
Because there's time jumps as well. Like there's a lot that they're trying to do subliminally to an audience.
Well, Matt, I've been dying to know, what have you been thinking on lately?
Yeah. I had been thinking about, I was kind of like mapping things out a little bit, just kind of thinking about where I was career-wise, what I wanted to do. The feature's kind of bubbling up. I just wrapped this job. The season of my show has wrapped. We're done and I'm moving on, right? So like I'm kind of in this transitional period where it's like a good time to kind of think through like, what do I want to do next, basically. So the day job thing is going, and that's, fun and exciting, and I think could turn out to be something that's really, really fulfilling. Fingers crossed, we'll see. Anyway, but then I've also got my feature going and kind of commercial directing, all of that stuff. And I kind of was trying to figure out, how do I organize and prioritize things? And it struck me this morning as I was kind of like working through things and just kind of thinking on them, that essentially with, I think, any creative career, and this is a working theory, so, it's going to evolve, all of that stuff. But that with any creative career, specifically filmmaking, you kind of need to have 4 different buckets in the modern era of being a creative. You need to have the short term, something that provides you stability, right? Make sure that you are in the right headspace to be able to do your work. And in this case, that's my day job right now. And then a medium term bucket, that's my commercial directing. That's the stuff that, like, if I wanted to really juice my career, I'm taking all these meetings, I'm talking with lots of people, I'm reconnecting with people, I'm sending my reel out, I'm doing all that stuff, you know what I mean? Just kind of hustling to get that going. It's unlikely that I will have a job in 2 weeks based off of all those conversations. Could happen, could get lucky for sure, but, like, you know, you plant all these seeds and then all of a sudden...
It's like the Tom Morris method of getting jobs, which is
right, exactly.
You get hired by the person you talked to 2 years ago, and then
exactly.
But but are you doing the second part of the Tom Morris? Well, I am. Yeah, definitely. Like, hey, here's some new work.
The follow up. Yeah. Yes, 100%. Yeah, and I, you know, it's a topic for maybe another conversation or another episode, but, like, I have a MailChimp. I have, like, a running spreadsheet. I keep notes on when I touched base with people, what things I've sent them, all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, definitely. But it, you know, it hadn't been a thing that was top of mind for a number of reasons. You know, I was in-house a couple places, baby interest, etc., blah, blah, blah. So now I'm kind of back into, like, really being in a place where I can book more commercial work, and I'm excited and have an appetite for it. So that's kind of the medium term stuff. And the long term stuff, obviously, is the feature. Like, that we're putting dates on the board, attachments are going great, you know, it's moving and grooving, but it's not, you know, assuming we shoot it December of this year, it's not going to be out for general consumption for another year and a half then, right? If you figure you shoot it in December, the best case scenario is that it's premiering at Sundance the following year. Right. Like that would be the fastest.
Yeah.
And that's Sundance. That's not general release. That's not VOD. That's not theatrical. That's not Netflix or whatever. So that's a while from now. Right. And then the fourth pillar, the fourth burner is the things that is your notoriety bucket, your reputation, your promotion and marketing, right? And that's the one that's the most amorphous or the most specific to each filmmaker. But, like, how do people learn about your work? Is that a personal connection? Is that social media? Is that networking? Is that something more public facing? Is that press releases and interviews and things like that? Like, it's going to be different for everybody, and it's going to be different for different phases of your career. But making sure that you're nurturing all of those different buckets, I think, is important for the long-term nature of your career. And the reason I say 4 burners is because you have to keep tabs on all of them. If you don't pay attention to burner number 4, eventually something's going to catch on fire. The whole house is going to burn down.
Oh, I thought it was going to be more of like a, let's put that on the back burner.
Sure. Yeah, but when you put things on the back burner, the gas is still on.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Right. So, like, yeah, you can put something on the back burner, but, like, either your dish is going to spoil at a certain point, right? Like, either it's going to be too cool and your commercial career is going to be undercooked. I put my commercial career on the back burner for too long, right? And now you have to kind of give it more attention, or you leave it on there for long enough, it just burns and spoils, right?
Yeah. I think, to me, like, the just to go on this metaphor, the bigger danger is that the flame goes out, you know? We're going to put this feature script on the back burner, and then it's like 8 years later and it's still
sure. You're like, oh wait, this hasn't cooked at all. Yeah. So when we were talking about this, Oren, off the mic, you said, oh yeah, this is interesting. You agree a little bit and you disagree on something. So let's skip past the stuff that you agree about. What do you disagree about?
Well,
what's the apprehension?
So you're saying the 4 burners are for you is like your day job,
mm-hmm.
your commercial career,
mm-hmm.
your feature career, kind of your more narrative, I guess, feature TV
mm-hmm.
stuff. And then your, like the branding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I guess and
just to extend the metaphor a little bit more, then this is maybe, I'm nipping your criticism in the bud. Ideally, you're making a meal. You're making a meal that everything has to complement one another, right? So if my first burner, my day job, was selling shoes, that's not going to help me as much as it could with making a feature. Maybe it will. Who knows? Maybe you just need money.
Your feature's about a guy that works at Foot Locker.
Sure.
You're stoked.
And look, there's pros and cons to day jobs that we've talked about many times. The pro being, the stability of paying a mortgage and all of that. And the con being that it is cutting into the attention that you can give to the 3 other burners.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the number seems arbitrary to me a little bit.
Oh, sure. It is. It was just kind of like chronological.
Well, I guess maybe for you, like we were just saying, like feature, day job, commercials, branding, but really I think kind of if you take a step back, like the big thought is like short term, medium term, long term, right?
100%. But then also the branding is the category of, what I oftentimes will refer to as like the anthill projects, the ones that you just have to kind of incrementally do every single day so that when you turn around, you realize, oh shoot, I've built a podcast for the last 10 years that has a following and, people are into the podcast being.
What's the burner? Project. Is that like your air fryer is the podcast?
Sure.
Podcast, yeah.
The podcast is the 4th burner is part of that, right? And not everyone's going to be a podcaster.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's just an interesting way to delineate things. I heard this interview with Ian Ponsjewell, and I apologize if I've mentioned this story already, but he was working and he was just trying to make ends meet, and he knew he wanted to do filmmaking, and he kind of was dabbling in everything and not quite doing anything well. And he thought, you know what? I should get really good at commercials. Like, I'm going to challenge myself to just focus on this one thing, which is commercials. And I'm just going to try to make every commercial the best commercial I've ever made. The next commercial. And he like climbed from making like spec spots to no budget things to like $50,000 commercials to now being probably the most in-demand commercial director in the world. He was with, a huge company. I think he was with Stink, and now he started his own company called Prodco.xyz. And it's like the best company in the world. And he's still making the best stuff in the world. But like the rumors, and he kind of says this himself too, is all he wants to do now is make like a feature film, and it's like, you could see. It's funny because me as a commercial director, I like see him as like this godly commercial director. Everything he makes is like so cool and so interesting. And he gets gigantic budgets and incredible VFX teams and all the stuff he'd ever want. But he can't get a feature film off the ground, which is like something that, you and I have done successfully in the past. And maybe he only wants to make like a $20 million feature, but he could self-finance a $20 million feature. But I think he wants like the studio behind him. He wants the talent behind him, or even his own thing. He just wants, I think, people to look at him as a legitimate filmmaker. And he's not, I don't think, getting that outside of this commercial world. So, but I do think that that's like kind of an interesting way to go. It's like, what if you just really, like, for me, my day job is the commercials, and it's kind of my short term. It's like, hey, during our call, I got an email about wardrobe or something. It's like my day to day. It's my medium term. I'm like thinking like, where's my career going? What's the best company for me to be at? Like it's my long term, like how do I want people to think of me as a commercial? What do I want my specialty to be? And then obviously I want to do like features and TV and all that stuff. But I guess I'm now a little more sold on this Ian Ponsjewell idea. Not that it's been successful. And I've seen so many commercial directors become huge commercial directors and not be noticed whatsoever. So I don't know that this is a realistic pathway, but I do know that it's financially viable, and that's like
commercial directing.
Yeah. Like if you're going to focus on,
and that's the rub, right? Is that like, I think that if independent film or just film in general was in a different place, I think we'd be having a different conversation. I think we're both lucky in that we love commercials and love commercial filmmaking, but like it took me a minute to really warm to it in a meaningful way, to the point where I'm tracking who's making what and nerding out about it in the way that I used to exclusively with film. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the problem is we came up through branded content where the idea was like, we'll talk about the brand so we get the money to make the cool narrative thing we want to make, you know?
Right, exactly.
And then we just got
the sketch, and it just happens to be like T-Mobile or whatever. Yeah.
So we didn't come with an appreciation of like the form, you know?
Sure. And now here we are. And like, look, if in 6 months all of the seeds that I've planted are paying off, and I don't have to worry about a day job anymore, that's a different conversation. It kind of depends on how much I like this day job ultimately, because it is like a interesting combination of pitching and directing and mentorship. So we'll see. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not selling shoes, and I'm really lucky and grateful to not have to worry about that. And also, how much space does it make for the other parts of my career? I think the thing that, so the big picture is still tricky, right? Like if I felt like I had a very clear avenue towards directing narrative, whether that's features or TV, in the near future, I would be all in on that, right? But in case listeners haven't noticed, Hollywood is in a major contraction. There are fewer television shows being made. It's harder to break in. And I would love to be shooting TV all the time. But the most immediate things that I feel like I can do to practice my craft and art is commercials and independent film right now. Those are the two pathways that make sense. And unfortunately, independent film, I will not make enough money to live.
It's like the reward for you shooting enough commercials.
The standard of living that I have, like I will not make enough money to survive basically on an independent film. So like, honestly, the plan is like shoot enough commercials to live on, to build a little surplus to live on while you go shoot the movie for a couple months, and not be totally boned when you come back and you need to edit and then make a DCP, and you know, your editors or your producers are on their next feature and it's just you, and you know what I mean? Like you have to build yourself a cushion. And again, we're lucky because we love commercials, but I don't think if I went in 100% exclusively on commercials, I don't know that I would be happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I guess that's the other place that I kind of like think I've evolved, not necessarily in a positive way, but if you would have looked at my to-do list 10 years ago, or, you know, like a lot of filmmakers have like a whiteboard or something on the wall of the list of their projects and ideas and things. And like, I've got this web series, I've got this spec commercial, I've got this feature film script, I've got this other feature film idea I'm working on with my friend, I've got this, you know. It's like everyone has that matrix when they start out as a filmmaker. And it's like, there's kind of this hope that someone like will call you and be like, hey, you got a Natalie Portman thriller? She's looking for one. And you're like, yes, I have this whole list of great ideas and scripts and partially. And if nobody calls me, I'll start making my short series and I'll do my pilot presentation and I'll finish my proof of concept and I'll, you know, work on the script with this actor that like is really cool. You know, so I think like when you start out, like your first 10 years as a filmmaker, everyone's got that board. And like my to-do list had like, ooh, I should work on this script and I should do this thing and I should get inspired by this thing. And now I look at my to-do list of things, you know, of current projects, and like 5 of them are things that I'm either going to shoot commercially or finish shooting and I want director's cuts. There's one narrative, you know, my scripted podcast that's like kind of not a financially viable job, so it's usually is on the bottom of the list. Yeah, it's on the front burner, but it's like on the little burner. And then I have a list of funny ideas, you know, that I think originally they were all feature ideas or TV show ideas, but now it's like I would burn an idea on a commercial pitch with no hesitation. And as I get older and realize more like where my strengths and weaknesses are and where my attention is, and you know what I'm not good at, ignoring the world and sitting down and writing for 4 hours a day, you know, or going on a trip or like taking time for myself. That's just not what I'm good at, you know? And so I've just like let a lot of those back burners, the flames die.
Just go out. Yeah.
And I'm not sad about it in the way that maybe I would have been.
And you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be. Really what I was trying to do was designate what do I want to apply any sort of urgency to or attention to, and what is going to go away, right? Like I certainly, like I said, I'm in a moment of introspection, you know, like it's we're recording July 1st. It's a holiday week. Yeah, I've got a little bit of time.
Happy 4th of July, by the way. I think that's when this episode comes out.
There we go. Kapow. But so I had a second to think about things, and I sat down and said, okay, well, what should I work on? What should I do? And needed to decide.
Because you're in a transitional period. Yeah.
I'm in a transitional period. Right. And so, you know, I have the shoebox of like, oh, well, you know, I've got the scripted podcast idea of my own, or should I go shoot a spec script, or should I shoot a short film or whatever? And I needed a way to organize those ideas into some sort of version of a priority. Right. And that's how I got to these 4 different buckets. Right. So if I'm spending all of my time on the feature, which is something, frankly, I would love to do, then I'm not paying attention to my medium-term goals of wanting to make more money so that I could save some or invest some or have the money to go shoot this film, you know, all of those things, right? So it was like, how do I figure out how to balance these in a way that nurtures all of them and then gets rid of the stuff that isn't going to be important, right? And so that 4th burner of like your personal brand, that's the stickiest one, right? Because it would be helpful if, for instance, I had a hit scripted podcast, right? Like as an example of an idea that like I've jettisoned long ago and frankly don't miss, in the same way that you're like, you know, it's okay if I don't sit down and write for 4 hours a day or whatever. I don't need to write certain projects, or I don't need to focus my energy in certain mediums. But everybody still has those big ideas and also needs to prioritize. And also, you know, if you're an Oren and you say to yourself, hey, like if you're just Ian Pond's Jewel, if you're just the best, funniest commercial director out there, if you could be happy being that person, then go do that, right? And if you're a Matt Enlow where you love doing that, but also if you spent all of your time doing it, there would be something that would bother you for the rest of your life, then you need to figure out how to slice that pie up, right? And realistically, I'm not going to be able to put full-time energy into 2 things at once. So what do I do? How do you figure that out, basically? And so if you figure out what your priorities are and how many burners you have on your stove, then it gives you a chance to map things out realistically and just look at like, oh, is this real? Do you know what I mean? If my goals were, hey, I need to be writing 8 hours a day and then also pitching on 16 commercials a month, that math doesn't math. And so I have to figure out something. Do you know what I mean? If you're in that position, if your ambitions or your needs or your career trajectory are asking different things of you than is what's feasible, then you need to know that. And it's easy when you're just kind of in that blissful state of like brainstorming and stuff like, oh, I should do this. Oh, I should do that or whatever. Like being real about like how long is that's going to take you is important.
The way I'm interpreting this is I feel like you're like at a crossroads, and that's when you start looking at the burners, you know, you're deciding like
definitely.
You're more like looking at the pantry and deciding what the next meal is going to be and which ingredients you need.
Sure.
I was at a crossroads like 6 months ago, you know, at the beginning
Sure.
of this year, trying to figure out, I mean, I was pretty into the commercial stuff, but I was trying to figure out the direction. Now I'm kind of finding like narrowing in on like the next path for the next year.
Sure.
And
yeah,
so
you were.
I'm no longer looking at the other ingredients. I'm just like making the meal.
Yeah. Definitely. Basically, Oren, you're at the equivalent of where I hope to be in 6 months, where I'm just like, oh,
You're on the feature and you're not worrying about anything else.
Right, exactly. And that's where my heart is. But then having built up a better reel so that when I'm done with the feature, I can be like, hey, great, this feature is awesome. I'm going to go back to shooting commercials, live my life, and write the next movie.
Yeah.
While I'm, on the commercial grind.
Yeah. I was seeing today on Instagram, this EP I used to work with, she just did a couple commercials with Alexander Payne and Derek Cianfrance before that.
I saw.
And I'm like, I wonder if those guys are like, whoa, I just made the same amount of money that I made on my 4 years as a feature filmmaker in like 1 month. Like how eager are they? Like, I have to go make another feature right now. Or they're like, oh, I'll take a year off and make some money in commercials, because they got to the top of the feature world and now are like, oh, let me take advantage of that and make some headway in the commercial world.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're like, whoa, features, what happened, guys? Do you know what I mean? Like the problem is just that, I mean, I guess Alexander Payne just made like an Oscar nominated film. Yeah, sure. So that's not a good comparison. Your point's not wrong. Like Alexander Payne made Holdovers that was released in theaters and on Hulu day and date, right? The paycheck that he got is probably still very, very meaningful relative to the rest of the country and world. But the days of getting like rich off of features is kind of over, like the ability to like just do features and like it takes you 3 years to get the next one going. It's, unless you're in really truly rarefied air, that's just not happening, especially right now. And so we have to figure out other things. And so what are the things that are going to make you happy and give you work-life balance and, let you pursue the things that do make you happy and are complementary is just always going to be the question when you're at a crossroads. Yeah, totally. Well, on that note, Oren, do you have a moment or two more to endorse with me? Yeah. Unpaid endorsements. I've got one for you that I think you're going to think is funny. And I used this morning, actually. Are you familiar with Mapify.AI? No. It is a AI tool that helps you mind map essentially instantaneously. So say you were putting together your 4-burner map, your list of different thoughts, right? Like, okay, I want to work on my commercial career. I want to write the next screenplay, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to, you copy and paste that, throw that into Mapify, and it will immediately give you a little org chart, a little tree with all of those different variables mapped out. And ideally, if you phrase things correctly, helps you kind of break it down into the questions and, or more importantly, the beats that you need to accomplish in order to get things done. So, and what are you using it for? Specifically for this, specifically for how do I map out like growing the different aspects of my career. Mind mapping. I'm checking it out right now. Yeah. Interesting. That's cool. Kaplan, what you got? Mine's going to be really bad, but I freaking love House of the Dragon. I know it's Game of Thrones' biggest show, like of HBO ever, but like I don't hear anyone talking about House of the Dragons. It's like they didn't like the end of Game of Thrones and just assume this show is bad or something. But I mean, it's like the only thing we got comes out Sunday nights. We're just so freaking stoked, and I told you before the podcast, I'm pissed that the Bear released 10 episodes at once. Yeah, it sucks. We're going to watch all of them in like 3 sittings and then have to wait another 2 years. And we're also not going to talk to people about it, which is the problem. That's there's only a handful of like appointment television specifically for people in our age and whatever walk of life. Like it's nice to have a little bit of currency. Like you and I aren't dudes who get to be like, oh, did you see the game last night? But you can be like, hey, did you see The Bear? And now that it's the binging has just kind of ruined that for us.
Yeah, and I don't know why it's on FX on Hulu. So they could have released it one a week. Anyway, but for that reason, House of the Dragon, I'm just like, every episode this season 2, I think, has been good. The first season, you do not need to have watched all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones to get into this show. You can just start episode 1. I think it's way easier to follow than Game of Thrones. I mean, there's a lot of names, thrown out. And if you've seen Game of Thrones, I think you'll know the tone better. You'll be ready for the tone, which is just totally bonkers. Like the first episode of the show. Did you watch it at all?
No.
It's like we have to watch a palate cleanser after every episode.
Yeah.
Because it's like so intense. Well, thank you everyone for listening. If you have any opinions about burners, animals, DCPs, we'd love to hear them. Email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com. You can find us across all social media at justshootitpod. Please follow me if you have to follow one of us at O'Kaplan on Instagram.
And I'm at Mr. Matt Unlow across all social media. This episode was edited by Noah Bayshore, thanks Noah, and produced by him as well, along with additional producing by Tyler Small. And you're listening to music provided by the Free Music Archive and the artist Jazar. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye.